Part 271. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2706. The Goguryeo army quietly retreated, and the current tent was just a cover for the eyes. But after all, there are thousands of people, and the movement is not small, and you will know if you are willing to investigate. When Chi Bai Li heard the scouts' report, he couldn't lie down any longer. He immediately got up from the wooden sickbed, put on his clothes, and went to order troops. If they retreat, they will definitely collide with Shuebei. Shuebei went around, and their plan was to make dumplings with them in front and back tomorrow, and Shuebei cut off their way behind. This time Kibi Li not only brought the cavalry, but also the rest of the infantry, leaving only 500 people for Zhou Man. He said, "If there is an enemy army coming, you should flee back to Bian City, you don't have to stay in the city. Wait here. The medical tent is different from other tents, so there is no need to fight with the enemy." Zhou Man nodded in agreement and watched them leave. Sumu was a little worried. "Teacher, there won't be any enemy troops coming, right?" "No," Man Bao comforted him, "unless they were deliberately trying to lure the generals, they wouldn't come here to take a back seat. They are so scared now that they will only stay away from the main tent of the Jin army, so how could they come here? However, the number of people killed in fighting at night may be more." Man Bao frowned, beckoned to call for a general flag, and instructed, "Send someone to watch in front. If the enemy army is defeated, we will move the medical tent forward." Zonki's eyes brightened, and he immediately led people to stare. It was a rare military feat to go on an expedition with great difficulty. Although protecting the medical accounts was also a credit, it was definitely not as good as fighting on the front lines. The general flag excitedly took the people to go. Man Bao said to Sumu, "You pack up, and move to the hospital with me later." Sumu asked blankly, "Then, what about these wounded soldiers?" "Give it to Jingzhong, and I'll assign 200 people to him, and the rest will bring herbs and pots and pans with us to move forward. They need to bring a lot of medical supplies, not to mention, there are a lot of cloth for dressing, and they must not be contaminated." The two packed up and began to wait for the general flag to come back. Chi Bai Li led the army into the enemy camp, and there were only less than 2,000 people left, and the rest of the camp was empty. It was too time-consuming, and after rushing to kill, they called to disarm and not kill, and then they knelt down and surrendered. Chi Bai Li sat on the horse, staring at the people and confiscating their weapons, only then left a team of soldiers and horses to watch them, and the rest continued to chase the enemy army's main account with the captured horses. Zonki finally chased after him, and when he saw that the battle was over, he immediately turned his horse's head back to find Zhou Man, and he stayed behind to discuss setting up a medical account with the generals who stayed behind. Although the transfer of medical accounts is dangerous, it is a good thing for the soldiers, and the remaining generals agreed without much thought. It doesn't need to be specially built. If the tents left by the enemy have not been destroyed, you can choose 2 tents at random, and put the wounded soldiers there as a medical tent. Man Bao moved over on horseback, glanced at the wounded soldier lying on the ground, and began to dismount and deal with Sumu together. After dealing with these wounded soldiers, someone came back to report, "The general has caught up with the enemy's main tent, and General Xue met the enemy first, and they are fighting." Man Bao asked, "It's not midwinter, can they see it?" So General Ming Jin withdrew his troops, and the enemy stopped attacking, but there were a lot of injured people and they had already camped nearby. Man Bao asked people to pack up all kinds of medicine boxes, mounted a horse and said, "Let's go and have a look." Night raids are only suitable for camping. People who want to raid at night know that there are enemies living there, and that there is fire in the camp, and the fire is so bright that they can still tell which side of the armor is on the person. But it is very easy to accidentally injure one's own people by moving to chase and kill like this at night, especially when there is a team of their men and horses on the other side. The cavalry rushes from here to there. It is easy to kill and kill one's own people. It is also difficult for the enemy to distinguish the enemy from me, so a truce at this time is the best. Manbao has been moving with the army tonight. Fortunately, they have many military doctors. If there were only 1 or 2 military doctors in the army before, don't even think about this kind of treatment. Manbao caught up with the army ahead with a sad face. There was no tent, and the soldiers slept together, holding their swords and guns on their chests, and sat up with a little trouble. Before Zhou Man ran in front of them, he felt his hair was upside down, and Keek also woke up and warned, "There is danger ahead, and there are archers facing you." Manbao asked, "Is it the Jin army or the enemy army?" Keek said depressedly, "Jin Jun." Manbao turned his head to Zhong Qi and said, "If you shout, you will say that the medical bill has arrived." Zhongqi also tightened his back and felt the danger as well, so his horse slowed down, and he shouted at the front, "Brother in front, the medical bill is here, this is Master Zhou Dash." The dangerous aura faded a little, he breathed a sigh of relief, and after thinking about it, he turned his head and said to Zhou Man, "Sir, stay here and don't move." He took 2 people forward first, making sure that their army was ahead. So what's the most annoying thing about marching at night? It's hard to see the 5 fingers when you stretch out your hand. You can stay in the tent and have a good fight tomorrow. Why should you run away at night? The Goguryeo army was also secretly scolding, the Jin army was really desperate, and they chased them at night. They all retreated and let them run for one night. What's wrong? They even attacked from both sides, shameless. Zhongqi went over to see his guarded comrades, took a flash of the torch, and confirmed that it was his own. They immediately lit the torch and ran over to greet Zhou Man. A colonel said, "Master Zhou, many brothers were injured, some of them were accidentally stepped on. When they were snatched out, they were seriously injured. Please go and have a look. Stampeding is the most difficult to treat. Most of them are internal injuries." Manbao frowned sadly and ran to the camp with him. After dismounting, he carried the medicine box and went over to see the wounded soldiers. She asked, "Is the general okay?" "It's all right." "Yes, ordinary captains don't know about He Li's injury." Manbao carried the medicine box over, and the wounded soldiers were lying on the ground. They lit a few fires and let them lie down around the fire. In addition, everyone could only simply wrap their wounds with cloth, because they were stationed in the camp. Here, there is no need to drink hot water. Everyone can only drink cold water from the water bladder. Fortunately, Manbao brought all the pots and pans with him. Manbao walked all the way, picked out the injuries that needed urgent treatment, and had them carried to the fire at the front. After looking around, she said, "Let's regenerate a fire, break some branches and leaves, and spread them on the ground. It's cold at night, and wounded soldiers can't get cold." She also doesn't mind the open air. It is impossible to have a tent in this situation. Let's go. Whether or not you can live depends on luck. Manbao began to ask people to put a pot on the pot to prepare the medicine, and asked, "Is there any water nearby?" The lieutenant shook his head, "I don't know. In the big night, they just had a fight, who will look for the water source?" Chi Bai He Li heard the report and came over and heard the words, "Send someone to look for it, and bring the scouts." They had surveyed the neighborhood before, and they must know where there is water and where there is no water. See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2707. Chi Bai He Li obediently took off his clothes and sat beside the fire. His injury was simple, and it collapsed. Manbao was already prepared, and he would take care of it soon before going to deal with the other wounded soldiers. He didn't leave either, just sitting by the fire and closing his eyes. The wounded soldier couldn't help groaning because of the pain. Man Bao didn't have a very good solution either. For example, for some relatively large operations, the time is long and the location is dangerous, then Mafi-san must be used, otherwise the pain will not stop, the other party's body will cramp, and there may be life and death pain. Pain will also speed up the outflow of blood. In that case, the pain-relieving needle cannot reach the ideal state, and Manbao can only give them Mafi-san. Others can only use acupuncture for pain relief. The most difficult thing to deal with is the soldiers who fell while rushing in the dark, and then were trampled and injured. Many of them were still alive when they were brought back. When Manbao looked at them again, they were already dead, but their bodies were still warm. Manbao treated 3 of them, 2 of them died in the middle, and only 1 survived. She frowned tightly, quickly changed a prescription, and asked someone to boil the medicine. This is to stop internal bleeding, use it first. But it might not work well in this case. Manbao is not in a good mood. It has been busy until dawn broke the next day. Everyone took out dry food to eat, and at the same time, they were on alert and wanted to fight. The Goguryeo army surrounded by the middle was more haggard than the Jin army. They were frightened all night, and the smell of medicine could be heard from the barracks opposite. Their wounded soldiers are still lying on the ground, not to mention taking medicine, many of them have not even treated their wounds. This contrast is a great blow to the military. When it was dark they were afraid, but when it was dawn, they were even more afraid. Chi Bai He Li stood on the road and looked over there, and said indifferently, "Get dressed and prepare for battle." The Jin army immediately acted in an orderly manner, nibbling on the dry food they carried before dawn, and prepared their horses and weapons after drinking a little water. Manbao was sitting by the fire and dozing off. She only squinted for less than half an hour. When she heard the movement, she woke up. She stood up and glanced over there, and said to the confused Sumu, "Wake up. Well, we'll retreat with the wounded in a while. They are a burden to stay here." Chi Bai He Li also thought so. Zhou Man was very important, he would not allow Zhou Man and the medical account to stay here when the 2 armies fought, so he sent someone to send them away. Because the battle was imminent, there were not many people escorting them away, and they had to carry the wounded soldiers. When the battle was full, there were only about 100 people, but there were quite a few wounded soldiers. Manbao also has to act as an escort to lead them. After walking for a while, they vaguely heard the sound of the ground shaking. Zhong Qi's complexion changed slightly, and after jumping off his horse, he lay on the ground to listen to the movement. He jumped up immediately, a large number of military horses came over, and everyone hid in the forest. Manbao also raised his heart and asked Keek, "Is it the enemy army or the friendly army?" "Keek, it's the emperor." Manbao breathed a sigh of relief before he could speak. Keek said, "But there are a few plants in the woods that haven't been recorded before, do you want the host to record them?" Manbao swallowed his words and asked it in his heart, "Isn't it recorded better before? I thought that the species that I haven't seen in this place are almost recorded. Have you recorded ginseng?" Manbao's eyes brightened, "Is there ginseng in it?" Keek responded and was in the woods. Manbao then moved to the forest with everyone. Zhong Qi didn't know whether the army behind him was an enemy or a friend, but there was nothing wrong with hiding. Their army is basically here, and there are only 1,000 people stationed in Bian City. It is impossible for so many military horses to come here. Zhong Qi suspected that the Goguryeo army had bypassed, and he was very afraid. As a result, the generals and the others were cut off. He found 2 more clever soldiers and whispered, "If you find out that there is an enemy army later, you should rush out of the forest and report to the general." "Yes." Manbao squatted on the ground and asked Keek, "Where are the things?" "Have to go further." Manbao glanced into the depths of the woods, and continued to squat without moving. "Then we have to wait a little longer, the timing is not right now." After coming from Liaodong, Manbao also used the excuse of digging for medicine to dig in the passing forests, but because he was too busy, he only had time when he was stationed in a certain place. Keek's ding-dong sound, and then write it down first. I really want the class teacher to stay and dig for 10 or 20 days when he returns to the DPRK before leaving. Zonky lay on the ground listening to the movement, raised his head slightly after a while, lowered his voice and said, "Come on." So everyone quietly raised their heads from the forest and looked at the road through the gaps in the grass. Manbao asked Keek while looking, "Has Bai Shan come?" "Have." Manbao's heart jumped up. The general flag also found the flag of the Holy Drive, and was also happy. "Master Zhou, it's your majesty." Everyone looked at Zhou Man excitedly. Manbao got up from the ground. "Yes, she is the biggest official now, and she has to go when she sees the matter of driving." Manbao went out under the protection of the general flags, and the vanguard found them. Knives, swords, spears, bows and arrows all came at her, and when it became clear that it was Zhou Man who put it down, the guards of the Forbidden Army headed immediately and saluted, "Master Zhou." With so many courtiers in the army, others may not know her, but Zhou Man is too conspicuous, and she is the only female official, it is difficult not to know her. Manbao cupped his hands and asked, "Is the holy car here to help General Qi Bai?" "Yes, what about the striker?" Manbao pointed to the front and said, "In the front, it should be a fight. The medical bills are a burden, so we have to retreat." The imperial guards led Zhou Man to see the emperor. The emperor and her learned about the progress of the war. He heard that Qi Bai and He Li were chasing after him overnight, and the Goguryeo army also encountered Xue Bei, who was in the back. "How about the casualties of the soldiers?" Manbao reported the data. This was just the casualty of Qi Bai He Li, the other side was not sure. The emperor sighed, feeling that Xue Bei's luck was not good. It is true that fighting at night has more casualties than fighting during the day, and the army is easily dispersed. Originally, if Xue Bei didn't turn around, or slowed down, it would be fine for them to retreat and leave. They didn't necessarily want those enemy troops, as long as they stopped staring at Bian City. It can be said that Qi Bai He Li chose to fight last night in order to protect Xue Bei and the soldiers and horses he brought. But since they stopped people, it is naturally better to take them. The emperor immediately dispatched Yan Li to support him, and he also went, but he did not intend to go to the battlefield, but stayed behind to watch the battle. Of course, Zhou Man will also follow. So Manbao sent the wounded soldiers back to the medical tent not far away, and she and Sumu went back with the emperor with medicinal materials and things. With the emperor here, the medical bills can be supported again. See you tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2708. Manbao walked over to Bai Shan. Bai Shan looked at her face and asked in a low voice, "Didn't you sleep last night?" Manbao said, "I slept for half an hour in the early morning." Bai Shan frowned slightly. Manbao looked him up and down and asked, "You have blood on your body?" Bai Shan smiled slightly and said, "It will inevitably be contaminated on the battlefield, don't you have it?" Manbao shook his head, "It's different. Although I'm a doctor, I don't have that kind of bloody malice in me." "You have it?" Only then did Bai Shan say, "I went into battle to kill the enemy." "No wonder." She asked curiously, "Then can you count as military merit?" Bai Shan became distressed, "I didn't kill a few people, I'm afraid it won't count as military merit." He said, "His Majesty said that I looked too soft and I was only good at writing, not martial arts, so let me go to the battlefield to practice." What else can Bao Bao say? "Are you going to be up soon?" Bai Shan said, "Come on, Your Majesty asked me to follow Lord Yin for this time. When Yin Li was about to go up, he could only follow. Man Bao said, then you have to be careful. Bai Shan nodded, don't worry, I'm wearing armor, and I still have Daji, he will protect me. However, going to the battlefield can really make people's blood boil. Bai Shan's thoughts are different now. He is not as afraid of life and death as he used to be. He can avoid crises when he can. Sometimes it is better to go head-to-head than to defuse a crisis. When everyone heard the sound of rushing and fighting, Yin Li immediately ordered his troops to go out, and left with the 2,000 forbidden troops, while the remaining 2,000 stayed behind to guard the holy car. Bai Shan and Man Bao nodded and followed Yin Li away. The emperor continued to move forward. The bodies of horses and people, as well as injured people, were on the road. Obviously, there was a big battle here just now, and the battlefield has moved from here to a place further ahead. Yin Li went straight over these corpses and wounded soldiers, while the emperor and the others began to clean up the battlefield, not only to find out the wounded soldiers of their great Jin dynasty, but also many wounded soldiers of Goguryeo. The emperor glanced at it and said, send it to the medical account together. Manbao was busy nearby, and the emperor continued to move forward with his people. In front of him was the open wilderness. No, it should be the fields and wilderness that had been harvested. At this time, the two armies were fighting here. The emperor did not step forward, but neither did he. Backing up, he stopped on horseback at the intersection to watch them fight. There were not many wounded soldiers left on the road. Those who could not run, most of them went to half-life. After being pulled out, they died soon after. Man Bao only temporarily rescued 8, 3 of whom were still alive. Captive. After dealing with their wounds, Man Bao got on the horse with the medicine box, and continued walking with the Num Su Mu, and soon caught up with the emperor. Before she hit the horse, she squeezed to the left of the emperor, half a step behind the emperor, and watched the battlefield together. The emperor sighed and said, the terrain just now is really a good place to attack from the front and back. It's a pity that the Goguryeo army was too timid and ran away overnight. Otherwise, Chi Bai Li's arrangement would have been very good. Man Bao said, why does your majesty insist? This is a war between the two armies, and people are not foolish. But they will still lose, the emperor said confidently, their military heart is gone. This is taboo. The emperor turned his head and asked the guards to go down and play the drums, so that people could beat the drums to help the battle. The guards walked away. The snare drum is used to boost morale. As soon as the snare drum on the Dajin side is sounded, when everyone sees the holy car here, it will be like a chicken blood. And the Goguryeo army was even more frightened. They had been frightened by Chi Bai and Li. They have been worried since last night until today. They didn't want to go and snatch Bian City back. The reinforcements, or the emperor of the Jin dynasty, is here, so desperate. In desperation, someone turned around and ran, running in all directions. Even the flag bearer holding the battle flag couldn't help but run, and then the flagpole was cut off by Chi Bai Li's personal soldiers. As soon as the flag fell, the Goguryeo army was in an instant chaos, and the emperor immediately said, let them surrender. The 2,000 imperial guards watching the battle immediately shouted loudly, disarm and don't kill, disarm and don't kill. Chi Bai Li and others who were in the battle shouted angrily, have you not surrendered yet? Shuebei also led the people to stop slowly. Seeing that the other party was hesitating with the sword, he pointed at them and shouted angrily, put down. The person being pointed was so frightened that he put down the knife. One person put it down, and the people around him put down one after another. As a result, more and more people put down their weapons, and everyone slowly knelt down to the ground. Chi Bai Li immediately waved his hand, and let someone step forward to take their weapons away and start gathering the prisoners. He turned his horse's head to meet the emperor. Man Bao saw that they were no longer fighting, so he bowed to the emperor, led people forward, and found a relatively clean open space nearby, and asked the wounded soldiers to come over for treatment. Qi Baihili ran over to see the emperor. The emperor immediately dismounted to support him, and said worriedly, "I heard that you were injured." "Your Majesty, I'm fine." It's no wonder that Qi Baihili's injuries are not light, and since he has been fighting all the time, the wound has never been better, and his health will naturally not be too good. The emperor personally helped Qi Baihili to find Zhou Man for treatment, and by the way, he found the person who stabbed Qi Baihili from a group of prisoners and handed it over to him. However, Qi Baihili shook his head and let him and the other captives be released together. He said, "We are our masters, it is only right for him to kill me. Now the war has subsided, since we want to release the captives, let us release them together. Let's go." The Jin army did not kill the prisoners, especially if it was the emperor's own expedition, and it was under the banner of justice, and he would not kill them. In the emperor's view, the people in Goguryeo were also his subjects, not only because Goguryeo belonged to the Jin dynasty, a vassal state, but also because this land originally belonged to the Central Plains. After the cattle, horses, and weapons were confiscated, and the armor and clothing were confiscated, the prisoners were sent back to their hometowns, which was not only a preferential treatment for them by the Jin army, but also a good way to make them lose their combat effectiveness. When they were all here, the emperor simply camped on a nearby mountain and waited for Zhou Man to deal with the wounded soldiers. Gaze Hu, order to take the city of Ungshi, Huangchang, and Yinchinj. Bai Shan wrote down one by one, and presented the 2 written imperial edicts to the emperor. After the emperor read it, he stamped the imperial decree and sent it out. The emperor did not intend to detour to Ungshi city, so he decided to continue the southward attack, and then made a passage from here to Ungshi city, and all the villages and towns on the road were subdued. Qi Baihili had no objection, and asked Xue Bei to lead the army to obey orders. He was lying down and recuperating. Zhou Man said that his wounds could no longer be slapped around, otherwise it would be easy to die. The next battle was particularly smooth. The defenders of Yinchinj and Huangcheng heard that the Jin army was coming, but they did not resist, so they gave up the city and ran away. The Jin army went in silently to take over, and then surrounded Ungshi Cheng, who had been stubbornly resisting. I saw a lot of book friends leave messages. They all mixed Goguryeo with today's Korea, but in fact, the Goguryeo of this period was not the Goryeo that everyone knows. This Goguryeo was a frontier regime in China in the past. It is sometimes called Goryeo in the Central Plains. Historically, in order to separate it from the later Wang family Goryeo, it will be called Gao family Goryeo. Its scope is from the Liaodong area to North Korea to the present. In the past, this part was unified with the Central Plains. Later, when wars broke out in the Central Plains, they established a separatist force here. Later, Goguryeo was destroyed by the Tang dynasty and returned to the territory of the Tang dynasty. Some people stayed in the same place, some people were relocated to the inland, and a small number of people fled to Silla and Baekje further south. The 2 vassal states are the scope of what is now known as South Korea, and the ethnicity is also the ethnicity of today's South Korea. So don't misunderstand, the Goguryeo in the text is the current Liaodong area, and we have the same origin, ha 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 ha. I don't know if everyone will see the writing, so I plan to put a few more chapters, too lazy to open another general surgery. See you at 6 in the afternoon. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2709. After Man Bao had dealt with all the wounded soldiers, he ran to Bai Shan. Let's go dig flowers and plants. Bai Shan is busy. The emperor is currently dealing with the city that has been attacked during this period of time. If he wants to change the name, he has to select officials from the court to take over the city, and even select some local seniors to meet to show the emperor's kindness. And then give them the first or second position of the place. After the emperor has decided on these things, they will need them to write imperial edicts and official documents to explain it. Sometimes the emperor can't remember who is who, and they have to remember for the emperor. I really thought that Zhongshu was easy to do, and those with poor memory could not stay in front of the emperor, otherwise, if the emperor asked 3 questions, they would be slapped the next day. But being so busy, Bai Shan still thought about it and said, "You wait until I arrive at Shenxi." "Forget it," Man Bao said, "the sun is short now, and it will be dark at most 2 hours after Shenxi. Give me the fortune, and I will take him there." "Bai Shan, are you trying to get good luck?" Man Bao smiled, "I don't want to take anyone else." Bai Shan sighed and said, "Okay, let's go, take both of the 2 guards at home with you. There are many defeated troops scattered now, and the forest may not be safe. It would be bad if deserters were accidentally hidden inside." Man Bao nodded and went to find Daji. So after lunch, they carried the medicine baskets into the mountains. Knowing that the place is far away, Man Bao went there on horseback. At first, they were able to ride horses, but when they entered the depths of the woods, there were branches everywhere, and it would be bad for them to ride again, so they had to dismount and tie up. Keek guided her to look for it, and after a while there was a ding-dong sound. Man Bao followed Daji with a medicine hoe, and said to Keek, "Don't scan too far, if it goes too deep, it will not only be dangerous, but we can't either. Come out." Keek doesn't care about her, it just scans. As for whether to dig or not, that's a matter of Man Bao. Man Bao was speechless, so he could only follow Keek's directions, and finally found the plant it designated, so he dug. Man Bao looked at it and didn't think it was medicine, but let it go, take it first. On the road, there was a towering tree that had never been seen before. Man Bao turned around, and finally excused that the branch seemed to be used for concentration, and asked Daji to climb up and break a branch for her. In fact, if Daji hadn't stopped her, she could have climbed up on her own. The 2 guards obviously seldom followed Joe Man out to dig things, and they couldn't accept the unreasonable trouble of their mistress for a while. But Daji's expression did not change, and he was used to it. He took off his shoes and climbed up the tree, and cut a branch and leaf down for her with a knife. Man Bao kept it well. Things were hard to come by, so she decided to divide it into several sections after returning, not only to be included in the encyclopedia, but also to be posted on the forum. Moving on, Man Bao saw a piece of ginseng in a thick rotted leaf. "It's really a piece." This was the first time she saw this thing. The ginseng she had seen before was dried in the shade, and she had never seen raw ginseng. Man Bao trotted forward and squatted down to see. She pulled away the dead leaves on the ground and began to look at these ginseng's eyes, and asked Keek, "How big?" "There are 2 big ones, and the others are smaller." Man Bao heard from the shopkeeper Zheng that it is very difficult to dig ginseng, especially the whole ginseng. The Korean ginseng is only in the Liaodong area, and the participation in the Central Plains is not the same. Man Bao put down the medicine basket, took the medicine hoe, and solemnly said to Daji, "We have to be careful when digging this thing." "Forget it, I'll dig it myself." She was afraid that they would dig it out, it was all money. So Man Bao started digging with a hoe. It was the first time she was digging, so she first found a not too big ginseng tree nearby to practice her hand. Must be. Man Bao summed up the experience in his heart, and immediately digged the second root, which finally stopped digging. The 3 of Daji opened their mouths in surprise when Joe Man dug out the first ginseng. They found such a good thing. No, it was the mistress who found such a good thing. The 2 guards couldn't help swallowing. Daji was also surprised, but soon calmed down. Seeing that she was digging hard, he simply took a hoe and said, "I'll dig it for you from the side." In this way, the speed is faster, the scope of digging is larger, and ginseng is better. Man Bao should go down. Manbao dug a full 5, all of which were selected by Keek for her to be good. The rest were a little small, and Manbao did not dug. Pushing the soil back and filling the hole, Manbao clapped his hands and looked at the 5 ginseng roots that were dug out and lined up on the ground. Yes, and it is divided into 4 sections, which look like human arms and legs. Daji dug out a dirty piece of cloth from the back basket, which was originally intended to wrap the roots of medicinal herbs. He knew that Manbao had the habit of wrapping roots back to plant, and sometimes digging up some soil to go back. "Madam, wrap it up with this. It is good." Manbao carefully put the ginseng on it, and put it under the basket after wrapping it up. She and the 3 said, "You know about this, I know, you are not allowed to tell others about it." The bodyguard asked blankly, "What if the young master asks?" Manbao was speechless. The second guard patted him and said, "The eldest lady will tell the young master." The armor just remembered, and bowed his head in embarrassment. Manbao gained a lot and asked Keek, "Is there anything else that has not been recorded nearby?" "No, the nearest one is on the other side of this mountain, and it takes about 2 hours to walk from here." "Well, it's getting dark now." Manbao touched the back basket and asked it, "You haven't recorded ginseng yet, can you scan the raw ginseng that appeared within the range before it was recorded?" Keek seemed to know what she wanted to do, and said after a moment of silence, "Yes." Manbao laughed instantly, and the smile was too bright. Daji looked at her smiling face and couldn't help laughing. "The eldest lady is so happy." Manbao nodded, "I'm very happy." "Don't be too happy," Keek said. "If you don't include it for a long time, it won't be included if it loses its activity, but you may not have time to include the next one." What he said seemed to make sense. Manbao hesitated for a while and then said to it, "I'll go back and think about it." Manbao happily returned to the camp with the basket on his back. It was almost dark when he returned. Bai Shan stood at the gate of the camp and waited for them. Seeing that they could come back before dark, he breathed a sigh of relief and immediately went up to meet him. "I'll give it to him. You saved the meal, you have to come out earlier next time, it is dangerous after dark." In the afternoon, a guest suddenly came to my house, so I couldn't find time to write. I'm really sorry. The next chapter is around 10 o'clock in the evening. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2710. The emperor had been working at the desk, and he didn't raise his head until the palace servant stepped forward to light the lamp. His eyes adapted to it, and he couldn't help but reach out and rub the corners of his eyes. Seeing this, Gu Zhong immediately stepped forward and said softly, "Your Majesty has worked hard all day, why don't you go out for a walk? It's getting dark, it's not good for your eyes to see things at night." The emperor thought about it for a while, and felt that his head was a little heavy, so he dropped his pen and got up and walked out. The emperor twisted his neck and walked in the camp. He had been fighting continuously for a while. Even for the physical and mental health of the soldiers, he should stop for a while, so the emperor chose to deal with the backlog of affairs at this time, and let everyone rest for a while. Day. Of course, it is also because the following small cities have surrendered directly. They are busy taking over the cities, and they cannot push the front line any further for the time being. The emperor circled the camp for half a circle, and was about to go to the hospital tent to take a look at the wounded soldiers, when he saw a familiar person standing at the door. It was getting dark, and the emperor's eyes were not very good, so he narrowed his eyes and pointed to the other side and asked, "Is that Bai Shan?" Gu Zhong glanced at it and said with a smile, "Your Majesty has good eyesight, it is Bai Shan." "It's getting dark, what is he doing there?" The emperor was about to go up with his hands behind his back, when he saw 4 horsemen approaching from a distance. A more familiar man got off his horse, and Bai Shan directly greeted him. The emperor stopped. Seeing his constipated look, Gu Zhong couldn't help but smile. It seems that Bai Shan is waiting for Lord Zhou. The emperor muttered, "Who doesn't have a wife yet?" But seeing Zhou Man and the guard behind her carrying a basket, he couldn't help narrowing his eyes. Did they go to collect medicine? Gu Zhong lowered his voice a few degrees, bowed his head and explained carefully, "I heard that there are not many medicinal materials to stop bleeding in the camp." The emperor's originally good mood suddenly turned bad, and his face turned gloomy. Gu Zhong immediately did not dare to speak, and carefully stepped aside. Man Bao and Bai Shan went back to the tent hand in hand. She asked Daji and the others to leave the basket behind, and then let them go. It is good to have an official university. Even the generals in the army are two people in one tent, and there are only a few people who can camp one person per tent. Man Bao happens to be one. Of course, when there was Bai Shan lived with her. Bai Shan asked Man Bao to wash his hands and eat, and he took out the things in the basket. Man Bao was reluctant. She squatted down, carefully took out a bag from the basket, and moved the meal aside and placed it on the table. Seeing her so solemn, Bai Shan couldn't help but ask, "What's in here?" Man Bao opened it layer by layer, but there were only a few layers, just a piece of cloth. After she opened it, she looked at Bai Shan and asked in a low voice, "Are you surprised or surprised?" Bai Shan nodded, "Surprise, surprise." He touched the ginseng on the cloth, lowered his voice and asked, "Is there any more in this thing? I'll dig with you next time. It's a joy to dig for this kind of stuff." Man Bao got tangled and asked him in a low voice, "Is your majesty going to join forces to fight Chang? Or are we still going south?" This is a military secret, and Man Bao didn't know it at this time. Bai Shan also lowered his voice and said, "We should join forces, and we won't be able to fight further down. The city of Ungshi is there. If we don't break through, the army can't go south, and it's easy to be cut off when we split up. How long will it take to fight Chang?" Bai Shan shook his head, "Not necessarily. Many of the city's defenders have fled, and Ungshi city is easy to defend and difficult to attack, and it is an important gate in Goguryeo, so they probably won't give up easily. That is to say, they may need to stalemate for a long time, and Man Bao does have time to search for precious medicinal materials such as ginseng." Man Bao said, "Then we will dig when we have time." But she wasn't sure that there must be, so she asked Keek, "If I include it for you, I'll ask you again, do you want points?" Keek, "No, you can record it quickly. You have rarely recorded things in the past 2 years. It is rare to make money, and you are still procrastinating." Keek said helplessly, "I can scan any species that can be included, whether it is included or not. This is always possible, right?" Keek was so considerate. Man Bao asked happily, "Has the main system stopped staring at you recently?" "Well, I heard some rumors. They have also found meteorites in a similar state in other worlds. They are tempting the host of that world to collect them. They should not be staring at us for a long time." Man Bao became more and more happy, so he tangled up among the 5 ginsengs. The 2 thickest and strongest ones would definitely not be given to the encyclopedia, and the remaining 3. Man Bao carefully compared it, and finally picked one up and put it aside, then hesitated between the broken ginseng and the smaller one. "Tell me, which one of the 2 should I give up?" Bai Shan asked subconsciously, "You want to give it to your majesty?" Man Bao immediately shook his head and whispered, "His majesty doesn't know about this, so he shouldn't need to send him, and they have broken through so many cities, so there should be some in the loot, right?" Bai Shan was surprised, "Is it for the little father-in-law?" Man Bao was silent. Bai Shan couldn't help but flash a smile in his eyes, lowered his voice and asked, "Shouldn't I choose the best one for my little father-in-law? Why do you still choose the worst?" Man Bao whispered, "It's not for him." She vaguely said, "I took it for sale." Bai Shan then made a comparison, and finally pointed at the one with the broken whisker. "This one, although 2 whiskers are broken, it looks pretty good." Man Bao picked it up and put it aside, and then went to organize the other plants. Bai Shan helped her. The two were busy with work, and a soldier came to call Bai Shan. Bai Sharan, your majesty announces you. Bai Shan looked outside, frowned slightly. It was already dark. He got up immediately, and said to Zhou Man, put your things away first, I'll go see what's going on. Man Bao was also surprised. Shouldn't he leave the camp? Bai Shan said, well, it's getting dark, so it shouldn't be, but you have to make some preparations. Bai Shan went to see the emperor. Man Bao thought about it for a while, and simply kept a copy of each of these things, and all the others were included in one go. Then she wrapped the rest of the ginseng in cakes space, and then went to wash her hands and eat. She took a steamed bun and gnawed it, then went out to find someone. Chi Bai He Li was not in the tent, and heard that he was also called by the emperor. Man Bao returned to the tent sadly, and it seemed that he was really going to leave the tent. Sure enough, when Bai Shan came back in the evening, he said to Man Bao, let's set up camp tomorrow morning. Why so fast? Didn't you say you will stay here for a few more days? Just now, a soldier came from Zhao Qiuagong's side, and the siege over there was not very smooth, so His Majesty plans to join the army. All the wounded soldiers will be sent back to Bian City, and the others will go to Ungshi City to meet. I saw a lot of book friends leave messages. They all mixed Goguryeo with today's Korea, but in fact, the Goguryeo of this period was not the Goryeo that everyone knows. This Goguryeo was a frontier regime in China in the past. It is sometimes called Goryeo in the Central Plains. Historically, in order to separate it from the later Wang family Goryeo, it will be called Gao family Goryeo. Its scope is from the Liaodong area to North Korea to the present. In the past, this part was unified with the Central Plains. Later, when wars broke out in the Central Plains, they established a separatist force here. Later, Goguryeo was destroyed by the Tang dynasty and returned to the territory of the Tang dynasty. Some people stayed in the same place, some people were relocated to the inland, and a small number of people fled to Silla and Baekje further south. The two vassal states are the scope of what is now known as South Korea, and the ethnicity is also the ethnicity of today's South Korea. So don't misunderstand, the Goguryeo in the text is the current Liaodong area, and we have the same origin, ha 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 ha. I don't know if everyone will see the writing, so I plan to put a few more chapters, too lazy to open another general surgery. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2711. The army came together. Zhao Qiuagong is stationed 20 miles away from Ungshi City. It's not because he has a big heart and has to station so close. It's because Ungshi Cheng is now closed no matter how much he scolds. Then you can only besiege the city. Man Bao followed the emperor here, and all the wounded soldiers were scattered in the rear city. When Man Bao was assigned to his camp, he first got together with the general doctor and the students to give lectures, encouraged them, and talked with them about the current troubles and difficulties, and then took out a cloth bag. She handed the bag to Zhou Liru and said, 2 pearls per person, not a lot, let's pass them on. Everyone was stunned. After receiving the pearl, they were still stunned for a while. The 2 military doctors were the first to react, and immediately bowed down to salute, thank you for your reward. This is a trophy, and it is rare. Unless they also rush into the city to rummage for things, military doctors are rarely able to get the spoils. And often when they attacked the city, they were the busiest. From the beginning of the war to the end, their military doctors were busy, especially after the end, all the wounded soldiers were sent over. How could they possibly go and grab the spoils of war with others? They don't show up when they're robbing, let alone when it's time to share. Generally they don't have a share. The military doctor was very happy, even though there were only 2 pearls, but the value was comparable to their salary for 3 or 4 months. Man Bao divided the things and encouraged them, do well, wait for the invasion of Ungshi city, if there are still trophies, I and someone will ask for some. Chi Bai Li looked very generous, and General Ashina was also generous, but he was too serious. He did not take the spoils himself, nor did his soldiers take too much. Basically, they were sealed and handed over to the emperor. Well, I don't know how generous Zhao Qiuagong is, but this time he is the chief executive. Man Bao thought about it, and Zhou Liru said, "Little ant, we are running out of medicinal materials." Then everyone remembered the business and said, "Teacher, there are only 2 packs of Angelica sinensis, and there are not many medicinal materials to stop bleeding. Now they are attacking the city again, and they will only need more medicinal materials." The casualties of the siege were high. Man Bao frowned and asked, "Have you ever bought medicinal materials from a nearby city?" Several people shook their heads together, and they had no money. This kind of thing is generally in charge of the logistics of the military, and they are only responsible for reporting. Man Bao said, "I see, I'll go talk to the chief executive." Man Bao went to find Duke Zhao. When Zhao Qiuagong saw Zhou Man, he subconsciously raised a smile, and then thought of something, so he turned around and left without seeing her. Man Bao hurriedly chased after him, "General Manager, Zhao Qiuagong, Zhao Shangshu." Man Bao caught up with the man, stopped him and said, "What are you running for?" Zhao Qiuagong just saw her and smiled, "It's Lord Zhou, I was thinking about something, and I didn't pay attention for a while. Do you have something to do with me? Is something wrong? Haven't our medicinal materials been delivered yet?" Zhao Qiuagong smiled slightly and nodded. Man Bao frowned, without questioning his fault, and said directly, "Then you can ask the logistics to buy the medicinal materials nearby." Zhao Qiuagong was stunned for a moment and then said, "Is there any medicinal herbs sold nearby? We have captured so many cities, and there must be medicines in the drugstores." When Zhao Qiuagong thought about it, he smiled and said, "Please also ask Lord Zhou to make a list." Man Bao was already prepared, and took out a thick one-fold list from his sleeve and gave it to him. "I need all the herbs on it. I can buy as many as I have, and I will not limit it." Zhao Qiuagong sighed and said, "There may not be so many." Many materials were brought with them when they left the city. Grain, iron utensils, medicinal materials, and even salt and tea are all military supplies. They brought them with them when they retreated. Many large families and merchants fled after hearing the news. There are not many such materials in the military. Man Bao said, "How much can I buy?" Zhao Qiuagong nodded and asked with a smile, "Master Zhou, how much medicine do you have? It's not enough to support you in a siege battle, and the medicinal materials will not come again. Next time you bring down the wounded soldiers, I will have no medicine to stop the bleeding. You can only rely on needles and sutures, but you know, there is no medicine, just rely on this. Seeing a way to stop the bleeding won't work." Zhao Qiuagong pursed his lips and nodded, indicating that he understood. Man Bao watched him leave, and finally scratched his head. He went back to the general doctor and the students to find them and said, "Everyone, go into the mountains and dig for medicinal herbs. What medicinal herbs are found, and the most important thing is the medicinal herbs to stop the bleeding." The military doctor sighed, "If there are no hemostatic herbs, next time I can only use fire to stop bleeding and plant ash to stop bleeding. This is what the army does when there is a shortage of medicine." Man Bao did not refute and agreed. Zhou Liru opened his mouth wide, "But didn't you say that using fire and plant ash to stop the bleeding will have serious sequelae? The former will hurt the muscles, bones and nerves, and the latter may make the wound worse." Man Bao said, "Focus on the moment first. At least it's better than letting people bleed all the time, which is also a no-brainer." So instead of waiting for Baishan to find time, Man Bao went directly into the mountains to dig for herbs with a group of students and military doctors, as well as the soldiers who were instructed in the medical tent. Not to mention, there are still quite a few herbs in the mountains. Originally, things in this world, even a very common weed, have the effect of stopping bleeding, but the effect is large or small. Manbao basically refuses to come, and whatever it is, since he sees it, he will dig it first. It's just that this fresh medicinal material has not been processed, and its medicinal properties are far less than those that have been processed. Every day, Zhao Qiuagong sent different people to the city gate of Ungshi city to scold him. Sometimes he would have people start a siege battle, and they would retreat after consuming a wave of weapons and defenders. However, siege warfare has always been unfavorable to the siege side, and its own casualties are greater. Zhao Qiuagong stopped fighting after 2 fights. He and the emperor said, "Your Majesty, they have supplies. I'm afraid that the city won't be able to be attacked without being surrounded for 2 or 3 months. The emperor said, "It's cold, we don't have that much time, and the logistics can't keep up. How long can we use the food we seized?" Zhao Qiuagong whispered, 20 days. The emperor pursed his lips and said, "If you can't attack by force, then outsmart it." He said with deep eyes, "If we can't win it after half a month, then we will withdraw." His Majesty. It was more heartbreaking for the emperor to make this decision, but he had to do it. He couldn't invest too much in this war, and couldn't let this war have too much influence on Dejin. Wei Ji, Lu Shangshu, and others have already sent letters of admonition one after another. The emperor frowned slightly. Lu Hui said that the food, grass, and medicinal materials have already been sent out, and they should have arrived half a month ago. Zhao Qiuagong was also annoyed and had no idea what the logistics of the escort were doing. Happy birthday to book friend Hanjian. Drunk. See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2712. On the 5th day of the siege of the city of Ungshi by the Duke of Zhao, the logistics of food, grass, and medicinal materials finally arrived. Zhao Qiuagong did not ask the reason for their late arrival. He directly cut down the escorting logistics officer, and then hung the person outside the tent. The emperor did not express an opinion on this, but when this matter came out, everyone was tense, especially the logistics officers. When the matter came out, the logistics officer who was still escorting things on the road immediately tightened his skin and tried every means to rush to the front line. Maybe there is a reason for them to be late, but for being so late, they must have their own selfishness and they are not working hard enough. After all, the knife on the neck is too high and not low enough. Who on the front line doesn't tie his head to the belt of his trousers? Soldiers need to work hard to survive, so if they are like the soldiers on the front line, they will naturally try their best to deliver things. The logistics were late for so long, and they were all delaying the fighter jets. Not to mention that some of them have been replaced. However, the herbs from the imperial physician's office were not replaced. Man Bao got the herbs and immediately replaced the fresh herbs he used before, but some soldiers couldn't stand the loss of blood. After all, the medicinal materials they dug up are limited, and some are only suitable for trauma, not for internal bleeding. Man Bao could only watch the person's stomach swell up, and finally vomited blood and died. If there is medicine, she can't stop the bleeding with medicine. She can also make a small incision in her stomach. There is a 40% chance that she can rescue people after opening the abdomen to stop the bleeding. It is also because of this that every time Man Bao passed by the gate of the camp, he tried his best not to look at the people hanging on it, and walked into the camp with a blank face. Because the weather is getting colder and the city of Ungshi cannot be conquered for a long time, the atmosphere of the camp is not very good. Ashina proposed, "Your Majesty, I would like to lead an army in depth and attack from behind." The emperor shook his head, "No, there are at least 100,000 troops in the city of Unshi, and they can easily cut your way back. It is also because of this that he does not agree to divide the army, and he does not want to use his soldiers to kill their numbers. The emperor pondered, I don't know where Feng Liang and the others went. Feng Liang was just downing Shishan at this time, and was hesitating whether to go north to Unshi city or east to Daxing city. The former can join with his majesty, and the latter can go deeper into the kingdom of Goguryeo, and maybe go directly to the inner city or Pyongyang, and then it is the real victory of Goguryeo. General Chiu, Feng Liang's deputy general, said, General Manager, go north, it's too deep to go east. Feng Liang hesitated, but if he went east and captured the inner city in one fell swoop, he would be able to destroy Goguryeo, which is a great achievement. General Chiu wanted to be more secure, and said to him, the weather is getting colder, Unshi city and Jiunan city are big cities, and the Goguryeo royal family will definitely do their best to protect these two cities. If your majesty cannot attack for a long time, you will definitely retreat. If we go east and go deep into Goguryeo, I'm afraid we won't be able to get out. Feng Liang lowered his eyes and thought. General Chiu continued to persuade, Sir, our wounded soldiers will not last long. Their team has no logistics. From the time they entered Baisha city, they were fighting to support the war. Every time they broke a city, they scavenged for food and medicinal materials. The officials of Shishan were prepared in advance, and they would not take the food and grass with them before leaving. And the medicinal materials are all burned, and I would rather burn them than leave them. Feng Liang stared at the map and said after a while, how confident can you be to bypass Jiunan city and go to Unshi city? General Chiu was about to speak when Feng Liang shook his head and said, the journey is good and we are about to go to the inner city. Since they want to protect these two cities to the death, they will definitely send a large number of reinforcements. In this case, we will besiege Wei to rescue Zhao, and send troops and horses from the city of Unshi. And from Jiunan city, it will be brought to the domestic city. But then we'll be cut off. As long as your majesty can break through the city of Unshi quickly, you can drive into the counter-encirclement, and it is uncertain who will die. General Chiu felt that this was too risky. Feng Liang said, wealth and wealth are in danger, let everyone dress up, and go to Daxing city tomorrow. There must be not many defenders in this place. We don't want to fight, we can collect enough medicinal materials and food and leave. General Chiu opened his mouth, but couldn't say anything against it. Feng Liang is the chief executive, and he has the final say on this matter. The reason why His Majesty appointed Feng Liang to be the chief marching officer of Pyongyang Road is because he is prudent and rational. Feng Liang said, go and invite Imperial Physician Zheng. Dr. Zheng had a shaggy beard, and he had long since lost his mental appearance, and his eyes were dark. He looked at Feng Liang blankly. Feng Liang's attitude towards him was good. They attacked along the road, and their losses were not large. Naturally, there was a reason why Goguryeo did not expect them to attack by sea, but there was also a reason why Imperial Physician Zheng and a group of students from the Imperial Physician Department accompanied the army. The death of the wounded soldiers, the rate is not high, and those with light and moderate injuries will soon be back on the battlefield. Plus the soldiers they captured along the way, enough. Feng Liang asked Imperial Physician Zheng, how many medicinal materials are there? Our next city is Daxing Cheng, and we can replenish medicinal materials after entering. Imperial Physician Zheng reported the list in detail and asked, aren't we going to attack Pyongyang directly? Feng Liangdao, Your Majesty wrote that Baikya is unwilling to send troops, and there is no one to guard Pyongyang, so I plan to go to the inner city. Although Baikya was reluctant to send troops, Silla sent some troops and was fighting from the east to Pyongyang at this time, which could also contain part of the troops. At this time, the country in Goguryeo was suffering from misery. They didn't understand how things could develop like this. Obviously, the fifth prince had already sent a letter saying that Dajin was willing to talk about peace. Why did he turn around and send troops to them? After losing the city and the land one after another, the royal family of the Gao clan was also very angry, and then couldn't help but blame each other. First, I said earlier, don't provoke Dajin, don't provoke Dajin, why don't you listen? This war was provoked by Dajin first. Your Majesty, how can you blame us? If you didn't send troops to attack Yingzhou, how could this happen? Because of Xinluo's provocation, Dajin has long been dissatisfied with us. Even if we don't make a move, they will not let us go. It's better to strike first. We started first, but where are we stronger now? Your Majesty, send someone to ask for peace. We still have to send troops to defend Engshi city. Liaodong city has been destroyed. If Engshi city is destroyed again, we will no longer have a city that can resist them. There is still an army wandering in our Goguryeo kingdom. I don't know where they are at this time. They must be wiped out, otherwise most of them will be in danger. Alas, so sad, life is going well, why do you have to provoke Dajin? The emperor was also looking at the map and thinking, I don't know if Feng Liang will come to Engshi city, or continue to go north to the inner city, or go south to Pyongyang. It is not good to be separated by such a large enemy area and ocean, and it is difficult to transmit information. Yin Li and Feng Liang are familiar with each other. After all, the two of them often deal with each other because of their work. They can be regarded as friends. He thought for a while and said, Feng Shangshu may go to the inner city. The emperor raised his eyebrows and stared at the inner city. See you at 8 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2713. If it was a domestic city. The emperor ordered the table and said, continue to surround the city of Engshi and think of other ways to attack the city. If Feng Liang really went to the inner city, then as long as they break down the city of Engshi, there will be no city below that can stop them from going south. He does not plan to go around the west to attack the city of Jianan, but go directly to the inner city and Pyongyang. Jianan city is isolated and helpless. What is the difference between existence and non-existence? So everyone began to sit opposite Engshi Cheng every day, thinking about how to break through it. Man Bao ignored them, checked the situation of the wounded soldiers every day, and then checked the medicine in the pharmacy. After confirming that it was all right, he turned around and went to dig the medicine. Bai Erlang followed behind her and said puzzledly, there was no medicine before, but there is already medicine, why are you still digging? Man Bao won't tell him that he is doing public service for personal benefit, and said directly, I don't know when the next batch of medicinal materials will be delivered. Dig a little more and be prepared. Bai Erlang said, you said earlier that you lack such things as scorpions, shouldn't you go and catch scorpions? Man Bao, let's not say whether there are any scorpions here, but there are. Now that it's cold, where can I catch them? Man Bao paused, turned his head and asked him, do you want to go? Bai Erlang hesitated, I really want to go, but recently His Majesty is calling everyone to think about good strategies for attacking the city. Man Bao, what does it have to do with you? Bai Erlang, I will occasionally be called for questioning. In fact, it was just an audition, and the emperor didn't expect them to give any ideas, just stood there and listened to what the generals discussed. Man Bao turned around and walked away, okay, I'll go by myself. Bai Erlang followed behind her and said, is it fun in the mountains? I heard people say that there are many precious medicinal materials in the mountains of Goguryeo. What kind of ginseng? Ganoderma lucidum, a lot. Man Bao felt a little guilty and said, there are not many. If there are so many, everyone will make a fortune by digging ginseng and Ganoderma lucidum. Bai Erlang looked at her suspiciously, there are not many, that means there are very few, have you dug them? Man Bao snorted, keep your voice down, come back to my tent, and I can show you. Bai Erlang's eyes brightened slightly, and he lowered his voice and said, "I'll dig too, you can take me with you. Didn't you say that His Majesty will summon you? It's okay, didn't I manage the pharmacy for you? It's normal to follow you to dig for medicinal materials." Man Bao thought it was reasonable, so the two of them took their own guards and ran away quietly, letting Bai Shan, who came to them after he was busy with the work at hand, flounder and couldn't find anyone. When she was in the forest, Man Bao remembered that there were outsiders this time, and she couldn't help but look at Bai Erlang's two bodyguards. Bai Erlang also glanced back and whispered to her, "This is given to me by the princess, Your Majesty told them to follow me every step of the way, it's fine in the camp, as long as they leave the main camp, they will if I keep following, I can't get rid of it." Man Bao asked quietly, "Will they tell His Majesty?" "No," Bai Erlang said, "I told them they wouldn't tell the truth, but it can't be hidden from Mingda." Man Bao nodded, "It's okay, Mingda can know." The two guards, although the voice was small, they still heard it. There is Keek to guide the way, and Man Bao's eyes are also powerful, and many medicinal herbs will not let go as long as they see them. Bai Erlang followed and dug a lot, but his interest was not here, he just wanted to dig ginseng and Ganoderma lucidum. Ganoderma does not exist, but ginseng does. Especially in this inaccessible forest, there are many good things in it. Bai Erlang followed Man Bao and slid into a small underground valley with a tree in his arms, and found a clump of ginseng. He swallowed his saliva and gave Zhou Man a thumbs up, "You're amazing. The locals didn't even notice this place, but you did." Man Bao said very modestly, "It's okay, it's okay." Daji and the four guards looked around nervously, turned around, and stayed by their side after confirming that there was not much danger. However, a guard dug out a few small piles of feces. Daji went up to take a look, smelled it, and said, "Hurry up, we can't stay here for long, it's bare feces." The guard said, "We came in too deep." As soon as Man Bao heard it, he immediately asked Keek which ginseng was the largest, and then he aimed to dig, and asked Bai Erlang to dig another one. "But don't be afraid." The army was stationed outside the mountain, and many animals ran deeper. "No way, even if there is food and grass, everyone is still hungry and lacks meat to eat. Therefore, the soldiers who are not besieging the city, who are relatively free, can't help but go to the nearby mountains and forests to hunt some game, plus the army is stationed outside, the more people, and the animals will naturally run away." The guard crushed the feces and said, "It's been a long time, at least 7 days, and there's nothing fresh around here. It looks like it's gone." But Man Bao's speed is still not slow. She is already very experienced. She dug down and dug out a complete ginseng in a short time. She was very happy, and then looked at Shiro Erlang. Bai Erlang was covered in sweat, and he wiped his sweat while digging. Man Bao pointed him, "Go a little further, dig deeper and extend it." Man Bao went to dig the next one, and Daji also stepped forward to do it. When the other guards saw this, they were also eager to try, but the master did not speak, and they did not dare to do it. Man Bao thought about the unfortunate place this time, it would be bad if he encountered the blind bear, they would definitely not be able to beat him, so he waved, "This one, that one, and this one are good, you guys. Dig it, it's yours, you divide it yourself." As soon as everyone heard it, their eyes lit up and they stepped forward immediately. Man Bao continued to dig another one. After everyone has dug up, Man Bao plans to keep the remaining little ginseng. The guard thought about digging it all out, and he said, "We won't be able to come and dig this thing in the future. Man Baodao, we can't dig it, but there are others. This is a gift from heaven and earth to the local people. We have dug good ones, and we always leave the seeds to others." She said, "And such a small ginseng doesn't have much medicinal properties, so it can't sell for a few dollars. Everyone just let it go, and quickly climbed up. Daegil and a guard went up first, then tied the rope to the tree and threw it down. They grabbed the rope and climbed up. Climbing out of the valley, Man Bao glanced back and sighed, "Look at the fertile land and lush vegetation in this valley, there must be a lot of medicinal herbs." Bai Erlang dragged her and left. "Let's go, we've already dug up ginseng, what if the blind bear really comes back? Didn't the book say that there are guardian beasts next to Tiankitabao? Maybe this bear is ginseng. Guardian beast. Man Bao, have you read the miscellaneous books and become enchanted? A bear doesn't eat ginseng, so how can it protect ginseng? And it's not a mythical beast. But bears live here. Do you think there will be ant nests or honey here?" No matter how they chirped, Daji hurried away with one hand in one hand, and the two of them trotted to follow in his footsteps. After running for a quarter of an hour, the group slowed down and breathed a sigh of relief. See you at 9. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2714. The emperor was standing on a slope with a group of generals and looked at the city in the distance, next to the gate of the big camp. Man Bao and the others came out of the woods happily, and saw the emperor not far away at a glance, so they turned around to bypass the guards and head back to the camp. The guards of the Forbidden Army who were scattered around met Zhou Man head on and looked at each other. Zhou Man took Bai Erlang and turned around and left, while the guards hesitated and turned to look for Yin Li to report. Yin Li glanced back at them and saw that they were slipping back to the camp with their backpacks on their backs. The emperor looked at the city in the distance and sighed, and asked everyone, "Can the ministers have a better solution?" Zhao Qiuagong said with a dark face, "Now the second prince of Gao's family is guarding Ungshi city, but he is a stable person. It's just too stable. Every day they send people to the gate of the city to scold him. They not only attack him personally, but also scolded the 18th generation of his ancestors. It is not impossible to attack the city, but the sacrifice will be great. The city of Ungshi is easy to defend and difficult to attack, and the number of defenders in it is much larger than them, which is very unfavorable to them. Other methods, everyone has thought about, including but not limited to, sneak attack, use gold and silver treasures to sow discord, and even dig a tunnel to the past. They have thought about it. But they were rejected after they proposed it. Bai Shan hesitated, "May the refugees enter the city from other gates?" The emperor's eyes flashed slightly, and he looked at Yin Li. Yin Li lowered his eyes and thought for a while before saying, "This minister will make arrangements." The emperor nodded and said to Zhao Guo justly, "We will attack tomorrow, and we will attack for 2 days. If we can't break through, we will retreat." The emperor looked at the distant city with deep eyes, and they could leave temporarily. Man Bao and Bai Erlang knew nothing about this, so when they returned to the camp, they took out the ginseng and looked at it, and couldn't help but smile at each other. Bai Erlang just watched it deeply and fascinatedly for a long time, and then handed it to Zhou Man. "I won't handle this thing, I still have to leave it to you." Man Bao took it and said to him, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it for you." The emperor returned to the camp with his hands behind his back, and only remembered halfway through, "By the way, where's the concubine? Why didn't he come to such an important meeting today?" Everyone looked at each other and looked at Bai Shan together. "Bai Shan." He lowered his head and replied, "The white concubine went into the mountain to dig for herbs." The emperor asked, "The medical bill is still short of medicinal materials?" Zhao Qiuagong froze and stared at Bai Shan. Bai Shan smiled and said, "Just be prepared. I haven't been busy these few days. The white concubine and Lord Zhou often go into the mountains to dig some herbs, which may be useful in the future." The emperor did not ask any further, but turned to ask Zhao Qiuagong, "Have the logistics been checked?" He said, I couldn't take it out before. Now since I have to wait, I should check it out, so that I know what to do. Zhao Qiuagong immediately said, a few people have been detained, and the minister is asking them to interrogate. The emperor asked, do you want Yin Qing to help? Zhao Qiuagong declined. This was a matter of the Ministry of War, and he did not want Yin Li to intervene. Yin Li didn't want to interfere, he was very busy, okay. Not only to protect the emperor, but also to select fine works to send to Anxi city at this time. To do meticulous work, the first thing is to be faithful, and then to go along with the local face, language and habits, etc., but the ability to kill is the last requirement. Yin Li began to choose among the whole army, and Zhao Qiuagong went to deal with the previous logistical accident. Lu Huan couldn't help but ran to them and complained, I can't sleep well now, I'm afraid I'll be dragged out to ask the guild while lying down. Bai Shan, what does this have to do with you? Aren't you in charge of the armaments given by the Ministry of Industry? Yes, but all the logistics officers live next to me. They won't come back after going out these days, or they were dragged back by someone. Man Bao frowned slightly when he heard the words, inquiring about the crime at this time has made the military's heart unstable. Why are your majesty and Duke Zhao asking for the crime at this time? She didn't see her herbs for so long, so she just wrote it down first, didn't she have an attack on the spot? But Bai Shan thought about it, maybe it's time for the teacher to return to the court. Man Bao stared, so soon? The last batch of medicinal materials hasn't been delivered yet. There are supplies, why should you retreat? Bai Erlang and Lu Huan also looked at Bai Shan. Bai Shan coughed lightly and said indifferently, the weather is cold, and Anxi city cannot be attacked for a long time. Your Majesty must think about the soldiers. Bai Erlang, it didn't take a long time to attack, right? It's only been around for 8 days. It's normal for a city siege to be fought for a month or two, right? Lu Huan, that's right, there is an official document from the Ministry of Industry, and the Ministry of Household has asked them to prepare a batch of new thick clothes on the way. In addition to the spoils of siege, we don't have a shortage of thick clothes for the time being. Bai Shan said, we just listened to His Majesty. Then 2 days later, the Emperor really ordered the retreat. Man Bao was surprised, but she didn't bother to express her objection at this time, because there were too many wounded soldiers in the medical bill. Zhao Qiuagong attacked for 2 consecutive days, and there were a lot of wounded soldiers. She still hasn't dealt with the wounded soldiers sent back after today's attack. When she finally dealt with the wounded soldiers, the tent was already packing up and preparing to retreat tomorrow. Man Bao was stunned for a moment, it's really retreating. Bai Shan nodded and said to her, it may be time for the teacher to return to court. Man Bao pursed his lips, isn't this anticlimactic? Bai Shan stretched out his hand and touched her brow, then chuckled, Your Majesty has his own plans, don't bother. Seeing that he didn't look worried at all, Man Bao was startled for a moment and then became thoughtful. It didn't take long for them to come out this time. Although the weather is cold now, in fact, the siege along the way went smoothly. The supplies have not been exhausted. Reconciled, courtiers will not be reconciled, so. Man Bao turned around to pack his luggage, okay, I'll be back when I get back. The soldiers in the battalion were also surprised, and then their morale was a little low because of the unfavorable siege of the city for the past few days. Zhao Qiuagong didn't say anything. The next day, the road was the way forward, and those who left behind to defend the whole army pulled out of the camp and left. The Goguryeo army in the city of Anxi saw it, and immediately ran to tell the second prince of the high school happily. The second prince thought for a while and said, maybe it is the other side's strategy to lure the enemy. We will continue to stick to the city and don't go out. The emperor retreated to Liaodong city and began to deal with follow-up affairs, such as picking out some people from nearby cities and ordering them to relocate to the inland, or the central plains, or the Jiangnan area. Anyway, he wanted to leave here. At the same time, an edict was issued to appease the people of the captured cities, and dispatched generals to guard the locality to set up the Liaocheng Prefecture Governor's office in Liaodong City to manage the military and government affairs of several nearby cities. The decrees came out one by one, and soldiers began to set up checkpoints and watchtowers on the way to Ngshicheng, and it seemed that they planned to divide and rule with Goguryeo. The second-year high school prince in Ngshi City also hesitated. Are they really going to leave? See you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2715. Prince, do you want to pursue the victory? The second prince of high school, how come you won? The victory of defending the city is also a victory. They set the checkpoint 20 miles outside the city of Ngshi, so how will we live in the city of Ngshi in the future? Second prince, whatever you say, we will take back the place under the jurisdiction of Ngshicheng. Ngshi City is a big city, and the area 80 miles away belongs to Quoxian County. The Jin army set the checkpoint 20 miles away, directly occupying more than half of the site in the northern suburbs of Ngshi City, greatly reducing the size of the city. Their future living space. The second high school prince hesitated, and didn't really want to send troops at this time. What if it's a trap? The edict has been issued, so it shouldn't be a trap, right? But the second high school prince insisted that the city gates facing west and north were still closed. But they quietly sent scouts out, keep an eye on their tents to see if there are any signs of troops leaving the camp, and carefully check the roads leading to our side. Yes. Man Bao took the dustpan, put it on the shelf, simply flipped through the herbs, turned his head and saw Bai Shan hurriedly leading people on horseback. The two of them only nodded before he went to the city lord's mansion. At this time, the emperor and several generals lived there, while Man Bao lived with the people in the medical account in the house next to him. She clapped her hands and turned back to the room where the students were making pills and powder. Seeing Zhou Man coming in, one student couldn't help but muttered, "Teacher, we have to return to the court. Why do we still need to make pills and powder? And the hemostatic kits, they started making them yesterday, and they've done a lot better." Man Bayadao, these medicinal materials are bought for combat, and they are used for military expenses. Even if the Eastern expedition is over, these medicines will remain in the army. There are few doctors in the army, so I don't know when it will be handled by them. Anyway, there is nothing to do now, so you can do more. You won't need to distribute it to the various armies later, they can directly distribute it to the wounded soldiers. Everyone can only continue to bow their heads and do medicine. Man Bao continued to review the medicinal materials they had dug up during this period of time. Some medicinal materials need to be processed after drying, and there are many processes. Man Bao took the dustpan out and put it on the shelf. Bai Erlang, who lived next to them, swayed over, grabbed a hand of the herbs, turned them over unconsciously, and said in a low voice, "I think it's a little weird." Man Bao glanced at him and patted his hand away. Bai Erlang stopped touching her herbs, and just continued to whisper, "Really, don't you think Bai Shan has been too busy recently?" He invited him to go to the street to play with him, and to visit Liaodong City. Oh, it is Liaozhou City now. He didn't agree to go, and he also told him to go out and hang out less recently. According to his understanding of Bai Shan, every time he went to a place, he had to appreciate the local scenery and customs. Bai Erlang glanced at Zhou Man. "You can still find an excuse to say that you want to make medicine." He didn't even find an excuse, he just said he was busy. But what is he busy with? Man Bao said, "I'm busy with the follow-up. Didn't you see that they are counting the list of migrations recently?" Bai Erlang said, "I asked, and Fang Shiren is responsible for this." Furthermore, he said in a low voice, "I found that there were fewer soldiers in the tent, and even General Ashina and General Shui were not in the tent. As for their 60,000 soldiers, Of course it is impossible for all of them to enter the city. The army is mainly stationed outside the city. Manbao has to assign military doctors and students to take turns to guard the large tent. Not only to take care of the wounded soldiers, but occasionally some soldiers have a headache. Gotta get medicine. Manbao looked at him. What are you doing over there when you have nothing to do? Bai Erlang, I am in charge of the pharmacy of the Imperial Physician's office. I will urge the logistics officer in the army to quickly deliver the next batch of medicinal materials. Bai Erlang got used to it. Before this batch of medicinal herbs didn't arrive late, he made 2 logistics trips a day. Now that the medicinal herbs arrived, even if the teacher wanted to return to the court, he was used to shaking it, and reminded the logistics officer, by the way, even if they were the teacher after returning to the dynasty, it is time for their medicinal materials to be shipped. How to deal with it is the matter of the Imperial Physician's office. After going back and forth, I found that the tents in the camp seemed to be somewhat empty. Some tents didn't have enough people to live in. Originally, a tent was supposed to live for 20 people, but now there are only 10 people. Some of them are simply empty. When he walked by, there was no such great smell at all. It was empty inside, not even a quilt, and no one had lived there at all. Bai Erlang stared at the calm Zhou man, say, do you know something, but hide it from me. Manbao looked at him meaningfully and said, some things have to be comprehended by oneself, they can only be understood, not passed on. Bai Erlang questioned, you and Bai Shan also knew each other, didn't they pass it on? Manbao said, since the army returned to Liaodong City, we didn't live together anymore, and we said 2 sentences in total, pay attention to rest. You too, be careful. You said, how do we pass it on? Bai Erlang looked at her sympathetically and said, in this comparison, Bai Shan and I have spoken more than you. After all, recently, the emperor also likes to carry him to govern, standing beside Bai Shan, and can always say a few words. From this conversation with Zhou Man, Bai Erlang confirmed his guess that the eastern expedition was not over yet, so he told her, you must keep our ginseng. Manbao waved his hand indifferently, don't worry, I will take it away. The ginseng is now placed in Keek's space, and occasionally taken out to dry. The ginseng needs to be dried in the shade, so there is no rush, she has time. Manbao turned the medicinal materials, and occasionally wondered, where are the soldiers and horses who left in the middle? They were hiding in the woods at this time. The scouts came back carefully from the outside, and reported to the general who was sitting on the ground, only opened the small city gate and let out a few scouts. When they arrived, they went in the direction of Liaodong City. General Ashina said, they must have gone to inquire about the situation of the big tent, continue to stay, be careful, and don't reveal their tracks. A group of hustlers slapped a small bug to death and sighed, General, we are heroes on horseback, how long do we have to stay in this forest? Wait for the news. General Ashina glanced at them and said, tighten the skin a little bit, now it's better to endure some hardships than to forcefully attack the city gate, thinking that the siege ladder is so easy to climb. Among the 10 people who climbed the siege ladder, 6 people died and 3 were seriously injured. Only 1 person could climb the city wall, and the chance of surviving was only 20%. Their role was to contain the wall. Forces, let the people below knock open the city gate. They didn't dare to speak immediately, they didn't want to climb the siege ladder. Emperor, Lao Tzu is more patient than you. See you at 6 p.m.